There's a word you use every month without any idea what it actually means. Salary. And the curious part is that it has nothing to do with money at its origin. It comes from the Latin word for salt, because in ancient times workers and soldiers received part of their pay in salt. Not in gold, not in coin, in salt. And that wasn't madness at all. Quite the opposite. Back then, salt was worth more than almost anything, because it was what preserved food, what kept what you'd earned from rotting before it could serve you. Without salt, meat hunted with great effort spoiled in 2 days. With salt, it sustained your family for months. Pay close attention to this, because this is where today's conversation begins. What gave salt its value wasn't being beautiful, or rare, or shiny. It was its ability to make what you already have last. And that's exactly where your problem with money lives, and I'm going to prove it to you in the next few minutes. Because your problem is almost never how much comes in. It's how much stays. And there's an enormous difference between those two things. A difference practically nobody has explained to you. Let me guess how your financial life works, and if I'm wrong, you can correct me in the comments. The money comes in, and it disappears. Not all at once, bit by bit, into things you can't even remember afterward. You look at your statement on the 20th and don't understand where it went, even though you did nothing crazy. Then comes the tightness in your chest every time your phone buzzes, because it could be another bill. Comes that constant mental arithmetic. If I let this one slide until next week, I can cover that one. Comes the silent calculation at the market, hand frozen above a product, deciding what to put back on the shelf. And then comes the thing nobody says out loud, which is the shame. The shame of borrowing from family again. The shame of a declined card with a line behind you. And meanwhile, everyone gives you advice that doesn't work. Get organized. Make a spreadsheet. Cut out the coffee. But nobody organizes what they don't have. And the coffee was never the problem. I didn't come here to give you one more of those. I came to show you what's happening underneath all of it. But before I take you into this, I want to ask something of you, and it's the first movement of the ritual you're going to learn today. There's an ancient law almost everyone has forgotten, and it says this: whatever you sincerely wish for another person passes through you before it leaves, and that's why it reaches you first. It's impossible to wish abundance on someone without feeling abundance in the instant you wish it. So do this with me now. Before continuing, go down to the comments and write the name of someone you want to see prosper alongside you, and a word of prosperity for that person. It could be your mother, your child, a friend who's struggling, your neighbor, someone you barely know but who you sense needs it. Write something like, "May nothing ever be lacking in my mother's home," or "May my brother find the work he deserves," or "May whoever reads this today get good news tomorrow." Write it feeling it, not out of obligation, because what matters is what happens in your chest as you write. And now the part that multiplies everything. After you write, scroll through the comments and reply to someone else's wish, saying only, "May it be so," and may it come back to you doubled. Because when 200 people wish each other prosperity from the heart at the same time, down here, something shifts in each one of them. One candle lights another without ever losing its own flame. And a room full of lit candles gives infinitely more light than a single flame alone in the dark. And let me be honest with you before we dive in, because I have too much respect for whoever is on the other side of this screen. I'm not going to promise you money landing in your account within 24 hours. Anyone making that kind of promise is lying to you, and usually lying to whoever is most desperate, which is exactly the person who can least afford a lie. What I'm going to give you today is something else, and in the long run it's infinitely more valuable. I'm going to show you the 6 invisible blocks that make money slip through your hands. And then I'm going to teach you a 5-minute night ritual that reprograms how your mind deals with prosperity. This doesn't replace work, doesn't replace learning about finances, doesn't replace a hard decision you may need to make. It prepares the ground so those things can finally work, because right now they don't. Over the next few minutes, you'll understand why your mind has been working against you without your noticing, which 6 blocks almost everyone carries from childhood, and exactly what to do tonight, before you sleep, to start dismantling it. Stay with me to the end, because the 6th block is the one that changes everything. Come back with me to the salt, because there's something in this story that changes how you see your own financial life. Imagine a man from that era who hunted a large animal. He has meat to feed his family for weeks. He is, in that instant, a rich man. But if he has no salt, in 2 days that entire wealth rots and becomes nothing, and he's back to zero as if he'd never hunted at all. Now pay attention to the right question. What was his problem? Lack of hunting? No, he hunted. His problem was lack of preservation. And that's exactly your problem, and probably nobody ever told you in these words. You've earned money in your life. You've had moments when more came in than usual. A bonus, a good sale, a tax refund. And where is it? Gone. And so you drew the wrong conclusion. You concluded you need to earn more. But if earning more were the solution, that extra would have solved it. And it didn't. Because the problem was never the faucet. The problem is the bucket. And salt has a second lesson almost nobody notices, and it's as important as the first. Salt in the right measure preserves and gives flavor. Salt in excess ruins the entire dish, and even makes the earth barren. There's an ancient expression about sowing salt in an enemy's land so nothing would ever grow there again. In other words, the same substance that preserves life can also kill it, and the difference lies entirely in the measure. And with money, it's identical. Money in the right measure preserves your family, protects your sleep, allows choices, gives dignity. Money as an obsession, in a quantity that's never enough, salts a person's own ground. It destroys marriages, sickens the body, drives children away, turns everything into calculation. And I need you to understand this, because here lies the balance of this entire video. I'm not teaching you to worship money. That would be trading a block for a disease. I'm teaching you to stop running from it. They're opposites. You don't need to love money to prosper. You need to stop treating it as an enemy and start treating it as a tool. And a tool is used in the measure the work requires. And I want you to understand why that's the most expensive mistake there is. Because it makes you spend your whole life solving the wrong thing. A person with a leaking bucket looks at water that won't rise and concludes they need more water. So they open the faucet wider, a second job, weekend side work, selling something, exhausting themselves. And for a while, the level rises a little, which confirms their theory and makes them continue. But the holes are still there, and now they leak even faster because the pressure went up. You've seen this in real life, and maybe you're living it. People who doubled their income and remain just as squeezed, only with a more expensive and more tiring life. They changed cars, moved to a pricier rent, raised their standard at exactly the same speed their earnings rose. And at month's end, the feeling is identical to before. That isn't bad math. That's a set of holes nobody sees, because they aren't in your budget. They're in your head. And that's what we're going to talk about now. Because there's something almost nobody realizes, and it explains nearly everything. Your financial decisions aren't made at the moment you think they're made. You think you decide in front of the supermarket shelf, calculator in hand, weighing the pros and cons. It isn't there. That's just the final theater. The real decision was made much earlier, by a part of you that works on autopilot, that learned in childhood how money is handled, and that today executes without asking your permission. It's that part that makes you spend exactly when you get paid, even knowing you shouldn't. It's that part that makes you avoid looking at your statement, postpone that conversation about a debt, skip asking for a raise even when you deserve one. You aren't being irrational. You're obeying an old program running in the background, one that was installed when you were a child, without you choosing anything. And here's the good news. An installed program can be rewritten. But to rewrite it, you first need to see which lines are wrong. And there are 6. I'm going to show you them one by one, and I'll warn you now, you'll recognize yourself in at least 3. And before I open the first one, let me ask you for a quick piece of honesty. Because the value of this video depends on it. As I describe each block, don't defend yourself internally. It's natural to want to say, that's not me. The mind does that automatically to protect itself from shame. But if you do that, you'll cross all 6 without seeing any of them, and you'll leave here exactly as you came. So do the opposite. Do the harder thing. When I describe one and you feel that specific discomfort, that tightening of recognition, mark it mentally. That discomfort isn't a sign that you're weak. It's a sign that you've just found the exact point where your money has been leaking for years. And it's worth gold. Because what's invisible can't be fixed, and what's been named can no longer act in hiding. You won't need to fix all 6. That would be impossible at once. You need to find your main one, the one that hurts most, because it usually holds up the others. And the first one I'm going to show you is, by far, the most common among honest, hard-working families. And that's precisely what makes it so treacherous. Block number 1. Deep down, you believe money is dirty. And before you disagree, listen carefully, because almost nobody notices this in themselves. You probably grew up hearing harmless phrases that planted this slowly. That guy is rich, but he's crooked. Nobody earns that much, honestly. Money doesn't bring happiness. It's easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle. So-and-so changed after he got rich. Each of those phrases sounds like wisdom, and some even have a grain of truth. But notice what your child's mind did with them. It concluded there's a choice between being a good person and having money. And if you had to choose, you chose to be a good person, obviously, and so you grew up with a part of you actively working not to have. Because having would mean becoming the thing you learned to despise. That's why some people earn well and sabotage themselves back to their starting point. It isn't a lack of competence. It's loyalty. Loyalty to an identity that says, people like us don't get rich. And the sign of this block is easy to recognize, if you're honest right now. You feel physical discomfort when talking about money. You're embarrassed to say your price out loud, and when you do, you immediately tack on a discount nobody asked for. You get uncomfortable when someone compliments you for having achieved something. You change the subject when the conversation turns to salary. And when you receive a larger sum, you feel a strange guilt, as if it weren't right. If any of that touched you, mark this block. And now let me give you back the truth. Money has no character. It's neutral, like a tool. A knife cuts bread and cuts people, and nobody blames the knife. Money only amplifies who the person already was. Whoever was generous with little stays generous with much. Whoever was stingy with little stays stingy with much. So when you refuse money out of fear of becoming corrupt, you're doing something tragic without noticing. You're taking resources out of the hands of someone who would do good with them, you, and leaving the field clear for whoever has no such scruples. Good people without money don't make the world better. They make it more unequal. Block number 2. And this is the quietest of all, the invisible ceiling. There is, inside you, a number, a monthly amount your mind considers normal for someone like you. You never calculated that number consciously, but it exists, and it was inherited. It's usually close to what your parents earned, adjusted by a small margin. And here's the strange phenomenon. Every time your financial life exceeds that ceiling, something happens to pull you back down. A problem with the car appears, a medical emergency, an opportunity that seemed certain falls apart, or simply you yourself make a bad choice you can't explain afterward. People call this bad luck, the evil eye, misfortune. But notice the regularity. The bad luck always strikes at exactly the same height, and that height is suspiciously familiar. Because when the mind sees something outside what it considers your place, it treats that as an error, and it corrects. It isn't the universe being cruel. It's an internal thermostat doing the job it was programmed for. And here's where I want to ask you the question I saved from the beginning, because now it has context and will hurt in the right place. Think about the house you grew up in, and answer honestly. What did money represent there? Was it a source of fights between the adults? Was it a forbidden subject nobody touched at the table? Was it shame, the thing you hid from the neighbors? Was it fear, that constant sense that it would run out? Or was it absence, the father who worked so much he was never there, and so you learned that money costs love? That answer is the most important line of code in your program, because everything you do with money today is a response to that scene. If money was fighting, you flee from it to have peace. If money was absence, you refuse to pursue it so as not to repeat your father. If money was shame, you hide it even from yourself. You aren't reproducing a destiny. You're obeying an old lesson nobody ever reviewed. And an old lesson can be reviewed? That's what the ritual I'm going to teach you is for. But first you need to know the 2 blocks that do the most daily damage, and the next one explains why scarcity makes you take decisions that impoverish you further. Block number 3. Scarcity hijacks your ability to decide. And this one is cruel, because it turns lack into more lack, in a cycle that feeds itself. Researchers who study poverty observed something striking. When a person is under intense financial pressure, their capacity to make good decisions drops measurably, comparable to going a full night without sleep. And notice it isn't because they're less intelligent. It's because their mind is occupied. An enormous part of their mental processing is constantly running that survival calculation. Which bill to delay? How many days until payday? What to do if the car breaks down? That consumes memory, consumes attention, consumes judgment. And so there's little left for thinking about next year, studying an alternative, properly negotiating a debt. That's why someone under pressure makes decisions that look irrational from outside, accepting absurd interest, financing what they shouldn't, letting an opportunity pass for lack of mental energy to evaluate it. It isn't stupidity. It's scarcity consuming your mind's bandwidth. And what do you do about that, since you can't simply decide not to be squeezed? The way out is to move decisions out of the heat of the moment and into a moment of calm. And that's more powerful than it sounds. A person in scarcity deciding at 11 at night, exhausted with the bill in front of them, decides badly. That same person deciding on a Sunday morning, coffee in hand, with no immediate pressure, decides far better. So create your decision moments outside the fire. Pick a fixed half hour each week to look at your accounts when you're not desperate. It'll be uncomfortable the first few times, you'll want to run, and that's precisely why it works. The discomfort of looking is always smaller than the cost of not looking. And here's the second rule, which is even more valuable. Never make an important financial decision on the same day you got the news. Give it 24 hours. That alone saves you from half the expensive mistakes of your life, because panic is a terrible advisor and it always insists it has to be right now. Block number 4. Your money has no destination. And this is the widest hole in the bucket, the one that leaks most. Think about it. Loose water runs anywhere. Channeled water turns a mill. And your money today is loose water. It comes into the account and sits there, with no defined function, waiting to be spent by whatever shows up first. And because it has no function, any impulse beats it. Because an impulse always carries more urgency than a vague goal. That's why the extra you received disappeared. It had no name. Money with no name becomes other people's money. Always. And look at the change, which is simple and brutal. Every bit of money that comes in needs a destination the moment it arrives, before you spend anything. I'm not talking about a complicated spreadsheet. I'm talking about naming. This piece is the electricity bill. This is savings. This is my son's gift in December. This is leisure, and I'm going to spend it with no guilt at all. Because when you name it, you stop deciding at every purchase and start deciding once at the entrance. And deciding once, calmly, is infinitely better than deciding 30 times, exhausted. And let me show you why this simple act of naming solves a psychological problem, and not just a mathematical one. When your money has no destination, every expense becomes a small internal fight, and you have that argument with yourself several times a day. Can I buy this? Do I deserve it? What if I run short later? That wears you down, and by the end of the day your willpower is gone, exactly like a phone battery. And it's when it's gone that you make the bad purchase. But when every unit of money has a defined address, that fight disappears, because the answer exists before the question. Leisure money is for leisure, so you spend it, and that's that. No guilt. And without guilt, you don't need to compensate later. Notice that this changes your emotional relationship with money. It stops being a constant source of anxiety and becomes a tool with clear instructions. And if you combine that with everything so far, you've understood 4 of the 6 holes. 2 remain, and I saved the most uncomfortable for last, because they involve something nobody likes to admit about themselves. Block number 5. You pay dearly to appear, and cheaply to be. And this one hurts, so breathe first. There's a category of spending in your life that isn't about you. It's about the audience. It's the car one notch above what fits, because the car speaks before you do. It's the clothing bought, not because you loved it, but because you imagined how you'd be seen in it. It's the round paid at the bar so you don't look broke. It's the party bigger than the budget allowed, so nobody thinks things aren't going well. And here's the perfect trap. Whoever has less is precisely the one who feels the greatest need to prove, because a lack of money strikes at the sense of personal worth. So the person spends what they don't have to hide that they don't have, and thereby has even less, and the need to hide grows. It's a hole dug with your own shame. And the saddest part is that the audience you're paying a fortune for isn't even paying attention. Nobody is thinking about you as much as you imagine. Each person is far too busy with their own imaginary audience. And there's a simple test to find out which of your expenses are of that kind. And I want you to do it today. Take your recent larger purchases one by one and ask, would I buy this exactly the same if absolutely nobody could know? If nobody saw it? If it couldn't be posted? If nobody commented? Ask with brutal honesty, and you'll see that some of them simply collapse. That specific item loses its meaning the instant the audience is removed from the equation. And look, this isn't about becoming a monk. It isn't about never buying anything nice again. Good things are good, and nobody needs to punish themselves. It's about knowing who's paying the bill and why. Because when you buy for yourself, the pleasure lasts. When you buy for the audience, the pleasure lasts until the next comparison, which usually comes within 2 days. And then you need to buy again. That's why it's a thirst that never quenches. You're trying to fill with objects a hole that's about recognition, and no object fills that. It never has, in anyone, in all of history. Block number 6, and this is the root of all the other 5. Deep down, you don't believe you deserve it. Notice that this one doesn't show up on the surface. It operates disguised inside the others. It's what makes you not ask for a raise even while delivering more than your colleagues. It's what makes you offer a discount before the client asks. It's what makes you accept the first offer without negotiating, even knowing it could be better. It's what makes you sabotage yourself right at the finish line, when things were finally working, with a silly mistake you can't even explain afterward. And where does it come from? Almost always from an old scene in which someone important taught you your size. A teacher who said you wouldn't go far. A parent who compared you to a sibling. A humiliation in front of the class. A tired adult who said, "Don't dream too big, the fall hurts." You've probably already forgiven that person, and you may not even remember the scene clearly. But the lesson stayed installed, and it's still running, deciding today how much you think you're allowed to ask of life. And that's why this is the root block, because notice how it holds up all the others. If deep down you don't feel deserving, it makes perfect sense to believe money is dirty, because that's a noble justification for not having it. It makes sense to have an invisible ceiling, because the ceiling is exactly the size you believe fits you. It makes sense to spend to appear, because someone who doesn't feel valuable inside desperately needs proof outside. It all connects there. And the enormous good news is this: if all the others rest on this one, then working on this one loosens the rest along with it. You don't need to fix 6 things. You need to rewrite 1 sentence. And that's exactly what the ritual I'm about to teach you does. And it's why it's done at night rather than in the morning. Because in the morning, your critical mind is awake, guarding the door, and it rejects anything that contradicts what you already believe. But in the minutes before sleep, that guard dozes off, and it's there and only there that a new instruction can get in and stay. So pay close attention now, because this is the practical part, and you're going to do it tonight. So let's get to the ritual, and I need to explain first why it works. Because understanding increases the effect. It has 5 minutes and 5 steps, and it's done in the last hour before you sleep. No magic. What it does is take advantage of a natural state your mind enters every night, that moment between awake and asleep when the critical barrier loosens. It's the same reason you lie down to sleep and your brain starts solving a work problem on its own, or remembers something you tried to recall all day. In that state, the mind accepts instruction with far less resistance. And what we're going to do is simple to describe and powerful to execute. Instead of handing that window over to the news, to internet fights, and to the anguish of the bill that's due, you're going to hand it an instruction chosen by you. You do this every night anyway. That's the truth nobody tells you. The only question is whether you program by accident or on purpose. And starting today, it's on purpose. Step 1, and it lasts 30 seconds. The inventory of what's already yours. Lying down, eyes closed, you're going to mentally list 3 things you already have that were once, at some point, a desire of yours. Pay attention to that instruction, because it's finer than it looks. It isn't generic gratitude, the "I'm grateful for life" kind. It's specific, and it's proven. The home you're in, which you once wanted. The job you have, which you once celebrated getting. the person sleeping beside you, or the child in the next room who was once a plan. And why does this matter so much? Because your brain is trained to see lack, it spends the whole day scanning for what's wrong. And that's been its specialty since the caves. Those 30 seconds are a focus correction exercise. You're showing your mind concrete proof that desire becomes reality, because it already has. 3 times. And proof is far stronger than promise. After that, the rest of the ritual finds prepared ground. Step 2, 1 minute, the descent. Now you're going to relax the body, because the body is the door, not the mind. Breathe deep, very deep. Hold a moment and release slowly. Do that 3 times, and with each exhale, let your shoulders drop further. Then bring your attention to your eyelids and let them grow heavy. And let that heaviness flow down through your face, your neck, your arms, your chest, your legs, to your feet. And then count from 5 to 1 very slowly, sinking deeper into calm with each number. 5. The body grows heavy. 4. The noise of the day drifts away. 3. Deeper. 2. Almost there. 1. At that point, you're in the receptive state I mentioned, and you can feel the difference. Thoughts pass more slowly, like clouds, and none of them pulls at you. Don't skip this part thinking it's frills. It's precisely what separates a phrase repeated into the void, which changes nothing, from an instruction planted in fertile ground, which changes everything. Without this step, the rest is just affirmation, and you've already tried affirmations alone, and you already know they don't work. And how do you choose your phrase, since it's the heart of the ritual and it has to be yours and not mine? Ask 3 questions, and it takes 2 minutes. First, of the 6 blocks I described, which one caused that specific tightening in your chest? Don't overthink. The first that came is the right one, because the mind rationalizes afterward. Second, if that block simply no longer existed in your life, what would you do tomorrow that you don't do today? Notice that the answer to that question is always a concrete action. I'd ask for a raise. I'd charge the right amount. I'd open my statement. I'd say no to my brother-in-law. I'd start that thing. And third, what is the short, present tense phrase that describes the person who naturally does that action? There's your phrase. Notice the logic. It isn't about having money. It's about being the person who acts differently with money. Because that's what changes the outcome. If it's hard, use one of these 4, which cover almost everyone. I can ask for what I'm worth. I can have and still be who I am. I have permission to go beyond what I was taught. I decide where my money goes. Pick one and stay with it for 7 nights, without switching, because switching every night is the same as planting nothing. Step 3, 1 minute. And this is the heart of it all, the single instruction. Here you're going to say, inwardly, one phrase that directly attacks your main block, the one that hurt most when I described the 6. And it has 3 rules that cannot be broken. First, present tense, as a statement, not as a request. Second, short, because a long phrase can't be absorbed in that state. Third, possible to feel, and that's the most important of all. If you don't believe it even slightly, the mind rejects it immediately. So if your block is deservingness, don't say I'm a millionaire, because part of you will laugh and the effect dies. Say something that slips past the defense, like, I can ask for what I'm worth. If your block is dirty money, say, I can have and still be who I am. If it's the invisible ceiling, say, I have permission to go beyond what I was taught. If it's money with no destination, say, I decide where my money goes. Choose one, yours, and say it 3 times, with feeling, without hurry. Not 6, not 20. 3. Anxious repetition wakes the guard. Step 4. 1 minute. The scene. Now you're going to feel, and not merely say, because a word without emotion is a seed without water. You're going to imagine a short, specific scene in which your block is already resolved, and feel it in your body. And look, it isn't the mansion and private jet scene. That doesn't work because your mind doesn't buy it. It's a small, believable scene, one step ahead of where you are. You looking at your statement and feeling calm rather than dread. You saying your price out loud, firmly, and the other person accepting without arguing. You paying a bill before it's due and feeling that relief in your chest. You buying something for your mother without having to calculate 3 times. Stay in that scene for 30 seconds and pay attention specifically to the sensation, not the image, the relief, the steadiness, the lightness, the quiet pride. Because it's the feeling that records, not the picture. And here's why this isn't silly fantasy. You're rehearsing in advance the emotional state of someone who has already resolved that. And people who rehearse act differently when the moment actually comes. Step 5. 30 seconds. The seal and the release. Before letting sleep take you, you close with gratitude. And there's a logic behind that almost nobody explains. Gratitude is the only emotion a human being feels for something that has already happened. Nobody gives thanks for what might come. So when you give thanks in advance, you hand your mind the strongest message there is. It's already mine. It's done. So say inwardly, feeling it for real. Something like, thank you for what is already mine and for what is already on its way. And then comes the hardest part of the entire ritual, the one almost everyone ruins. You let go. Don't keep repeating. Don't keep checking whether it worked. Don't sit anxious, waiting for a result tomorrow. You plant and you sleep. Because whoever digs up the seed every day to see if it's rooted kills the seed. Anxiety is proof that you don't believe, and it cancels what you just planted. You did your part in 5 minutes. Now let sleep take you and let your mind work all night, in silence, unwatched. And tomorrow morning there's one thing to do. One. And it's what closes the circuit. The next morning has one step, and it takes 10 seconds. But without it, half of the night's work is lost. As soon as you wake, before touching your phone, before your eyes are properly open, you're going to repeat inwardly the same phrase you planted before sleeping. Just once. And the reason is technical. That instant of waking is the mirror of the instant of falling asleep. It's the same receptive window, only on the way out. When you repeat the phrase there, you close the circuit between what was planted during sleep and the day that's beginning. And here's the detail that decides everything. If the first thing entering your head in the morning is your phone, with bad news, bills, and comparison, you've just erased what you wrote. Your mind takes the most recent pattern, and the most recent becomes dominant. That's why people who do the ritual at night and grab the phone on waking feel no difference at all. It wasn't the ritual that failed. It was you handing a freshly painted canvas to someone to throw paint on within the first 30 seconds. And let me tell you exactly what to expect in the first 7 days. Because wrong expectations are what make good people quit early. In the first 2 or 3 days, you probably won't feel anything spectacular. And that's precisely when most people abandon it. Maybe you'll just sleep better, which is a real effect of the relaxation and is no small thing. Around the 4th or 5th day, the first interesting thing starts to happen. And it's subtle. You catch yourself reacting differently in a small situation. You were going to give an automatic discount and didn't. You were going to avoid looking at a bill and looked. You were going to buy on impulse and paused for 3 seconds. They're small, almost invisible movements, and it's easy to dismiss them. But pay attention to them, because they're the proof that the new groove has begun to open. And here's what is not a sign, so you don't fool yourself or get frustrated. It isn't about finding money on the street. It isn't about repeating numbers on the clock. It isn't about mystical coincidence. The true sign is behavioral, and it's always the same thing. You acting differently from who you were last week. And a night will come when doubt hits hard. So I want to prepare you for it now. Because prepared, you don't quit. There'll be a day when you lie down, start the ritual, and a voice inside you says, "This is nonsense." You're talking to yourself in the dark while the bill keeps coming due. That voice will come. It comes to everyone. And it usually shows up precisely on the nights when the day was bad. And here's what to do. Don't fight it, because fighting gives it strength. You acknowledge it and continue. Say inwardly, calmly, something like, "I heard you, and I'm doing this anyway." Because that voice isn't your enemy. It's the old guard trying to keep things as they've always been, which is his job. The more he complains, the closer you are to touching something real, which is why resistance is a good sign and not a bad one. And if one night you simply can't do it, that's fine too. Don't turn it into failure. You do it the next night. What kills the process isn't failing once, it's the shame after failing, which makes people abandon everything so they don't have to face it. Fall and come back. No drama. That's how anything is built. And now I need to tell you the most important thing in this video. The one that separates people who change their lives from people who collect motivational videos. The ritual doesn't make the money appear. It makes you appear. Pay attention to the difference, because it's everything. What changes with practice isn't the world out there. It's what you see and what you have the courage to do. Someone who does this for 3 weeks starts noticing opportunities that were always in front of them and that the scarcity mind erased from their field of vision. They start saying their own price without stammering. They start opening the statement without that dread that made them postpone. They start negotiating a debt instead of pretending it doesn't exist. They start saying no to an audience purchase. And then, weeks later, results appear, and the people around them call it luck. But you'll know it was no luck at all. It was a sequence of different decisions made by a person who finally stopped working against themselves. It isn't magic. It's far better than magic, because it doesn't depend on anyone but you. Stop with me for a second here, because what we've just discussed is the kind of thing that changes someone's course. And I'm certain there's a person in your life who needs to hear it today. Think of them now, really. That person who works too hard and never gets anywhere, and who has started believing the problem is them. That friend who's embarrassed to charge what they're worth. That mother who erases herself to pay for everyone else and never has anything left. That young person just starting out, for whom there's still time not to inherit their parents' invisible ceiling. Send this video to them now, before you continue. And I ask that for a reason that connects to everything we've seen. Remember the law I told you about in the introduction, that whatever you wish for another passes through you before it leaves. It works the same here. When you share prosperity, you place yourself in the position of someone who has enough to distribute, and that is the exact opposite of a scarcity mindset. You lose nothing, and you become the one who gives. Send it and come back, because the final part is still ahead. And the final part is the law of circulation, but I'm going to give it to you honestly differently from what you've heard out there. Many people preach that you must donate 10% and that this unlocks abundance. I'm not going to tell you that, especially if you're squeezed, because taking money from someone who already doesn't have it in exchange for a promise isn't generosity. It's something else. The real principle is broader and more beautiful. Money is made to circulate, and whoever locks everything down out of fear creates a relationship of tightness with what should be a tool. Circulating doesn't mean donating money you don't have. It means keeping an open hand in the measure of your size. Paying properly whoever works for you. Not haggling with someone who already earns little. Teaching what you know to someone starting out. Giving your time when that's what you have. Helping someone land a job. And yes, when there's genuinely surplus, sharing with whoever needs it in the measure that fits without hurting you. What opens the path isn't the amount. It's the posture. Someone who acts like a person with enough stops deciding from panic. And someone who decides without panic decides far better. And there's a rule that sounds strange and that protects all of this. Don't go around telling people you're doing it. Keep it to yourself. And the reason isn't mystical. It's very practical, and you'll recognize it immediately. When you tell someone about a change that's just beginning, two bad things happen. The first is that you receive the reaction, and one little mocking smile, one you believe in that stuff, one raised eyebrow from someone you respect is enough to plant a doubt that joins your own doubt and puts out the flame that was starting. The second is subtler and more dangerous. Talking about a change gives a premature sense of having already changed. Your brain registers the social recognition as if the thing had already happened, and the urgency to act drops. That's why so many people announce plans enthusiastically and never execute. So do the opposite of what the world teaches today. Don't announce. Do. Let people notice the difference in you months from now without understanding exactly what changed. Results are the only argument nobody can debate. And now I want to come back to what I asked of you at the very beginning. Because only now do you understand why that was the ritual's first step, and not just any request. Remember I asked you to write in the comments the name of someone you want to see prosper, with a word of prosperity for them? If you wrote it, look at what happened without your noticing. To wish abundance on someone from the heart, you first had to access the feeling of abundance inside yourself, even if only for 3 seconds. You practiced the state this entire video is teaching you, and you practiced it before I explained it. If you haven't written it yet, go down and write now, because it takes 20 seconds and it's the cheapest thing there is. And then do the second part, the one that multiplies. Reply to someone else's wish, saying only, may it be so, and may it come back to you doubled. Because down here tonight, there are hundreds of people doing exactly the same exercise, and each one believes they're alone in the struggle. When one lights another, the whole field grows stronger, and nobody leaves here the way they came in. So let me gather it all up, because it was a lot, and I want you to take it organized and be able to do it today. We started with salt, and discovered that the word salary is born from it, because what gave salt its value was the ability to make what you already had last. And there we understood that your problem is almost never the faucet. It's the bucket. Then I showed you the 6 holes. The first, the belief that money is dirty, which makes you sabotage yourself out of loyalty to an old identity. The second, the inherited invisible ceiling, which corrects your life every time you exceed the size you were taught. The third, the scarcity that consumes your capacity to decide and makes you accept what impoverishes you further. The fourth, money with no destination, which becomes other people's money because it never had a name. The fifth, audience spending, which digs the hole with your own shame. And the sixth, the root of all, the sense of not deserving, which holds up the previous 5. Notice that none of them is in your spreadsheet. All of them are in your head. And you already know the ritual by heart, 5 minutes before sleep. 30 seconds listing 3 things you already have that were once a desire. Because proof is worth more than promise. 1 minute relaxing the body and descending from 5 to 1. because it's the body that opens the door, not the mind. 1 minute planting a single phrase, short, present tense, and possible to feel, aimed at your main block, said 3 times calmly. 1 minute feeling a small, believable scene in which it's already resolved, paying attention to the sensation and not the image, and 30 seconds sealing with gratitude and letting go, without anxiety and without checking. In the morning, 1 repetition of the phrase before touching your phone, and the circuit closes. That's it. It costs nothing, depends on nobody, and fits into the most exhausted night of your week. And the key to it all is consistency, not intensity. Doing it 7 nights in a row, calmly, is worth far more than 1 night done forcefully and then abandoned. You're carving a new groove into stone where a deep groove already exists. And grooves are opened by repetition, not by hurry. And I want to close with what may be the most important thing in this video, especially if you have children or someone small who watches you. Remember the invisible ceiling, that inherited number your mind considers normal for someone like you? It didn't fall from the sky, someone handed it to you. And at this very moment, without noticing, you're handing yours to someone. A child in your home is learning right now, today, this week, what money means. And they don't learn from what you say, they learn from your face when the electricity bill arrives. They learn from the tone of the conversation between adults when the subject is price. They learn whether money in this house is a forbidden subject or a normal conversation. They learn whether their father asks for what he's worth or silently accepts less. They're recording all of it at the same age you recorded yours, and they'll carry it for decades. And that's why doing this work isn't selfish at all. It's the opposite. You aren't only changing your own life, you're interrupting a chain that may have been repeating in your family for 3 generations. Someone has to be the first to break it. And look, it could be you, starting tonight, in 5 minutes, lying in the dark. And now let me repeat, with care, the honest agreement we made at the start, because true prosperity never needed to deceive anyone. What you learned here is a practice of focus, intention, and mental reprogramming. And it's powerful within what it is, but it walks alongside your actions in the real world, never in their place. It prepares the ground so that your work, your decisions, and your learning can finally pay off, because right now they run into your own blocks. And if your situation today is one of serious pressure with heavy debt, also seek practical and free help, financial guidance, debt negotiation, someone who understands numbers to sit down with you. Asking for help contradicts nothing we discussed. It's exactly what a person who feels deserving does. To close, 3 quick things. First, if you haven't written it yet, go down and write the name of whoever you want to see prosper, and reply to someone else's wish with that may it be so, and may it come back to you doubled. Second, share it with the person you thought of, because this conversation arriving at the right moment changes years of a life. And third, leave your like and subscribe, and don't close YouTube yet, because the videos appearing on your screen now continue this conversation. And take this with you tonight, Salt Preserves. And you learned that preserving is worth more than accumulating. 5 minutes before sleep, 1 phrase, every night. That's how you change an inheritance.